It's hard to be a boy. Let me introduce you to three of them. One was my friend in primary school, another, my friend from mini rugby, the final being a student 2 years below me in secondary school. All three are dead. All three died from suicide. Whilst each and every suicide is devastating, I must admit that I've become desensitized to the news at this stage. I wept when I heard of the first suicide to affect someone close to me. I failed to process the latter ones. It felt almost inevitable. Multiple young men who were students at my university when I was there committed suicide. It has started to feel like an all too common tragedy, a fact of life. In Ireland, suicide is the leading cause of death for young people, and young men are much more likely than young women to be its victims. I can't say why. It's far too complex an issue to be resolved in a few lines, but it is a clear indication that things are going badly for boys and young men, and we're struggling to talk about it. It's hard to be young, alone, and full of angst. Young people, and specifically young men, are the loneliest demographic in society. This is not necessarily surprising. We are told to get jobs we don't want, to grow up, to fend for ourselves out in that big bad world. We must deal with the large scale upheaval of our lives as we transition from boys to men. But we don't really know what men are anymore. And when this transition goes wrong, it can be catastrophic. Just ask the hikikomori if you ever get a chance. Originating in Japan, the term hikikomori is used to describe members of society who experience severe social withdrawal and isolation. What this means in practice is someone who doesn't feel comfortable leaving their house or perhaps even their room for extended periods of time, stretching into years or decades. The majority of Japanese hikikomori are men. The first generation of hikikomori reached adulthood just as the Japanese economy, which had been booming as if indefinitely, came to an abrupt halt. It unceremoniously left a forgotten generation in its wake, unable to fulfill the roles society expected of them, for which they've been preparing for their entire childhood. Hikikomori are not solely a Japanese cultural phenomenon, though their emergence during the Japanese economic crash is enlightening. The transition from boyhood to manhood is always challenging, but if you add a massive shock to this tumult, you might just get 1 million Japanese men receding from public life entirely. It's hard to be a young man. We are now outperformed in school, outnumbered in university, and out-earned as graduates. We will be poorer than our parents with neither housing, nor earning potential, nor planet to live on. We are more likely to die from suicide, homicide, and in war, to be homeless, to recede entirely from public view. We spend more time in prison. We are more likely to be injured or die during work. We die younger. We are more likely to have no friends and live with our parents. We struggle to find romantic attachment. We live in turbulent times. We were told to sacrifice the best years of our lives during the pandemic so that those who have already lived their best ones could have a few more. We were told to come together so that the health services that our governments failed to service wouldn't collapse. We were locked down, locked in, locked up. How could we ever grow up locked up? Many of us have failed. Our reading age plummeted, while some of us will never grow old. And what did we get in return? Social media separating us, a planet that's simmering. The art of the deal would suggest that we've been fucked. The social contract in tatters. It's bullshit. Whilst the challenge of embracing adulthood is neither unique to our generation or to men, The ever changing societal expectations of what it means to be a modern man has left many adrift, unable to catch up. Few in the mainstream are willing to address and seek to resolve the problems of men. Those who usually do only habitate the right, the alt right, or the far right. In mainstream opinion, it feels like gender parity appears only to be a problem when it is men and the patriarchy on top. Blame for being boys. Blame for being men. What does that even mean? How can I be the personification of both toxic and fragile masculinity at the same time? We are faced with girls and women who have caught up and surpassed us in many facets of life. We look upwards and see a system with men still very much on top, but they're not from our generation. And rather than tackle gender inequality at their level, those on top feel grandfathered in whilst enforcing solutions on us. Many say that this is progress, that it is the inevitable swinging of the pendulum, the rebalancing of historic injustice. But to boys born in the 21st century, it's hard not to feel oppressed rather than the source of oppression. I've never experienced maleness or masculinity being openly celebrated, only castigated. I've never witnessed as strong attempts to attract men into fields dominated by women, like those to bring more women into STEM. The International Days of Women and Girls are impossible to ignore, whilst the UN has failed to embrace the days of men and boys. What started as simply listing the struggles of boys and men has quickly become a comparative task in estimating the true worthy victim of gender based oppression: boys or girls. The words just flowed. It was invigorating, and I barely realized I was doing it. And that's how they get you. They feed on the real, genuine concerns of young men and twist them into zero sum game thinking of in group versus out group dynamics, with women, immigrants, and LGBTQ quickly becoming culture war enemies, and the real issues of men being silently forgotten. On one side, you have people screaming, no, it's hard to be a girl. Whilst the statement that it's hard to be a boy makes no allusions to the challenges faced by women and girls, the comparison is inescapable. The gap left on men's issues by reasonable parties is being filled by unreasonable ones. They start by acknowledging that it's hard to be a boy, affirming your lived experience. Why, yes, it is hard. It's undeniably hard to be a boy. And yes, it feels like no one wants to help. So let me. They'll gargle. Maybe they'll sell you a skewed version of their opponent's positions. Men are the problem, and therefore you are the problem. Maybe they will slip in some good old fashioned misogyny, telling you to man up, stop complaining, stop crying. Life is a struggle. Real men are forged in the fires of pain. They'll prey on your subsequent feelings of inadequacy and insecurity. Their reasoning will squelch with squeezed snake oil. They'll attempt to provide certainty in this chaotic world. They'll promise to teach you the one true path to become a man, which more often than not involves imposing yourself on top of others. And there are many paths, many gurus, many ways to make money, none of which address the actual root causes of the issues faced by men. I know what they do because they did it to me too. When I was 16, I became enthralled in a culture war I never intended on joining. I'm not so sure that I want to talk about my own experience, but for a reason that lies somewhere between catharsis and masochism, not machismo. Here I am. I had hoped that by rereading the diary entries of my 18-year-old self, I would find answers to the allure of alt-right ideology. Maybe hidden within the pages, I'd find examples of misogyny and chauvinism. And then I'd be able to chastise them in front of you so I could placate my woke overlords. But honestly, All I found was a sad, scared kid, grasping at any source of knowledge. All I wanted was some clarity and meaning in this chaotic world. There was nothing inherently wrong with me. I wasn't a misogynist. I just wanted answers. Answers to questions that were being ignored, at least that's what I felt, or ridiculed in the mainstream. And unfortunately, only one subsection of society was willing to address the questions I was asking. I was easy prey, and they captured me. Combine this with an algorithm hungrier for attention than a caterpillar. My innocent search was so smoothly co opted and corrupted. I remind myself now that it was my algorithm that was toxic, not my masculinity. I wasn't toxic. I was just a kid. I began by seeking commentary on the problems faced by men and the failings of feminist ideology to recognize the existence of these problems. I wanted genuine acknowledgement of the struggle of boys, because these discussions weren't voiced or tolerated by those who I saw as in power, like my teachers. Due to these real world shortcomings, I was forced to find a refuge, a safe space, online. This is the social media age. Where else do you turn when you have a question that needs answering? And my journey was fueled by YouTube and Reddit. And as they say, the medium controls the message. On YouTube, I could watch 7 to 10 minute segments, not too dissimilar to this, to dip my feet in. And on Reddit, I could read angry rants and peruse frog memes. A simple starting question about feminism led me to videos of feminist fails, and Ben Shapiro destroys, and Milo Yiannopoulos takedowns. These started clogging my suggestions, and I must admit, it is very intoxicating to receive a point of view that sounds oh so reasonable and yet is shunned by more palatable entities. This quickly escalated into longer video formats. I could watch hours of Stephen Crowder changing no minds and debating with an eclectic use of logical fallacies. Not that I cared, against unprepared and uninformed, woke university students. The mere act of standing up to status quo thinking was enough to entrap me. I can't say what it is like to first encounter the messengers on TikTok, but I can only assume it's much worse, much more insidious. Whereas on YouTube, my active search was being rewarded, what went from being funny memes on Reddit turned into dives ever deeper, submerged in the darkest of subs. I received an education in gender relations that I wasn't looking for, beyond enjoying laughing at frogs. Did the experience become infectious? Were the recesses of r slash MGTOW and r slash MGTOW 2, MGTOW, for those not in the know, men go their own way, separate from women, the places to learn about relationships? Did their constant talk of false rape accusations lead me to distancing myself romantically from women out of fear? I literally had never even kissed a girl. Why was I so concerned about accusations? On Reddit, I was taught to see empowered women as something to fear, single mothers as a drain on taxes and thus the hard earned incomes of men. I saw men as the predominant contributors to a tax system that worked against them. I saw parenthood as a prison run by women to ensnare, entrap, enslave men, to steal their money and their offspring. I saw divorce as a means to squeeze out alimony and custody. I wholeheartedly rejected the concept that feminism could be about equality when its very naming convention focuses on one gender. Reddit taught me all the terms of the incel lexicon, all its cartoonish characters, its Stacys and Beckys and Chads and Betas and Pepe and Keck. Was it all just a meme? Had I become the meme? I was a red-pilled, blue-balled, passive sponge soaking in their hate. Interest in the incoherence of specific sections and segments of fourth wave feminism, which had ignited my initial search, had become well and truly corrupted. It was doused in jet fuel and set alight. I became aware of so many male injustices that I had never even thought about, and that weren't reflective of my real world experience. The offline failings I had started my journey focusing on became irrelevant. I was now on a team and I wanted my team to win. More than this, the world I saw reflected back at me through my screen was far more frightening and dangerous than the one I would see when I put my screen down. A vicious, perpetual cycle ensued, forcing me to delve ever deeper to find comfort and solace from the chaos. Did I need Jordan B. Peterson telling me to embrace my inner lobster, to tidy my room, and to pet cats so that I may be free of chaos? Whilst my parents might argue about the merits of my newfound crustacean cleaning routine, all I wanted was to wrestle back control in what appeared to be an increasingly disordered, divided existence. There was the truth online, and no one recognizing it offline. By being further entranced by the online world, what started as a purely online relationship started to spill over into my offline life. I became a troll. The Irish abortion referendum in 2018 was a trollable moment, and I carpe diem'd it. In the real world, there was an accepted and acceptable viewpoint. There was my English teacher, the girls in my class, my family, all telling me I was wrong to question the perceived wisdom on abortion. In class, there was no room to discuss ethics and morality, to explore edge cases and where the line should be drawn, nor was there any attempt of neutrality or impartiality on the part of my teacher. Far from fostering inquisition, I felt woke feminist ideology was being imposed upon me, telling me that abortion was a woman's issue and that I should shut up. When you're told you cannot hold a certain view or even take part in the discussion, it certainly makes dissent feel alluring, enticing, a forbidden fruit to feast on. To me, the establishment was not the decades long unbroken chain of men at the top of politics and the church, who held a stranglehold on Irish society, the very men who denied contraception and divorce, and who institutionalized single, pregnant women, forcing them to work as slaves and then to give up their children. That is, if both mother and child survive birth. The same men whose policies continued to vilify and ostracize women up until the referendum, forcing them to flee filled with shame overseas, and forcing many others to die during pregnancy and childbirth. No, to me, those that needed to be challenged were the women who taught me. They were the institution, the mainstream, the authority figures. Feeling silenced by the establishment, I pushed back. I felt I had to. Fortunately, I was a parrot well prepared to trigger and troll, having consumed copious quantities of alt-right America's abortion critiques and devilishly devised talking points. Each and every dinner time was turned into a frenzied battleground on abortion, where I imposed my devil's advocacy, or that's what I told myself, on my weary family. But at least we were talking and not using our phones at the table, I guess. The question, if you cannot debate a topic, then what's the fucking point, encapsulates my thought process. For that's all the abortion referendum was to me, a topic to be debated. To me, the debate lacked any emotion or real implications, just like the ones I experienced online. Turning Point USA and PragerU meant that I was well versed in the stages of prenatal development. I knew when the heart starts to beat, when brainwaves can be detected, and when surviving outside the womb is possible. I had seen so many images of ultrasounds that arguably I could easily have been mistaken for an expectant parent. Yet, all this time online failed to make me see abortion as a personal, painful, human issue. It was just a debate to win against woke feminists. Sorry, Mum. Back in school, a mock referendum was held to teach us about civil institutions and democracy. What a good lesson. As it was run by a group of girls wearing repeal jumpers, perhaps it could be better classed as a mock URI. Boom, you just got triggered. Boom, boom, boom. Of course I voted no just to stick it to them. Whilst the mock held no weight and the actual referendum passed, elsewhere, the alt-right online machine gained momentous success offline, with the overturning of Roe v. Wade thanks to Trump's Supreme Court picks. Unbeknownst to the lamestream mainstream, the alt-right had already set the debate rules, the battlegrounds, the divisions. They recruited an army of trolls to fight, and they celebrated when Trump enabled their political wet dreams. Let us hope and pray. They keep on only wet dreaming, for pregnancies in the US have become far more dangerous. However, that would be a woman's issue, and far from this polemic and any of theirs. What started offline festered and stewed online until it returned unrecognizable to the real world, like a virus unchallenged and untested on the offline defense mechanisms. Trump 2016 was only the beginning. It's hard to be a young man. We are much more likely than young women to vote for right, alt right, far right, and fascist parties. Now, just wait here a second, that's something new. Indeed, I started this journey hoping to prod you into political engagement. And you did become politically engaged, and you influenced elections. Vindication on the theory is sweet, but it had nothing to do with me and my 3 WordPress subscribers, with only one of whom I'm not personally acquainted. Unfortunately, President Musk and his billions in blood diamond money got to you first. But the groundwork started long ago. The house of cards came caving in, one Joe Rogan episode at a time. I'm not angry at young men. How could I be? I'm just disappointed. Only joking, I'm fucking angry. What did we just do? You were angry and you changed the course of politics and continents. Only you voted for Trump and the AFD and Farage and the rest. What were you thinking? And now I have to deal with 50-year-old political pundits attempting to diagnose the woes of male Gen Zs. Stay in your lane, Stuart. Why are young men voting for far right parties across Europe and North America? Put simply, I believe it's a combination of real offline challenges like economic and social upheaval that have been corrupted by social media influencers, as well as the space on men's issues being not only ceded by established institutions, but denigrated by them. For the world, on average, it is the best time to be alive. However, for me, a privileged white Western man, things have certainly been better. Or at least in modern times, never have things felt, comparatively speaking, so bad. Pandemics, housing crises, climate crises, mental health crises, masculinity crises. Rather than address these concerns, if the only message surrounding masculinity you receive is the dangers of its toxicity and fragility, that it is the problem, boys and men may start to internalize this messaging. If you continue to tell someone that he is the problem, that he is deplorable, he may start to believe it. He may look to those willing to embrace him, manipulate him, transform him into their Frankenstein's monster. He will hate the villains, the women, the immigrants, the minorities, the LGBTQ plus community. He may take semi-automatics to schools, rifles to rallies, flamethrowers to the social contract. Genocides are orchestrated by evil, but carried out by naive, young men, as are fascist regimes. And unfortunately, fascists have already realized the opportunity presented by a lack of orthodox concern. They need only drop the match, for the forest is dry and will need no words of encouragement to go up in flames. How did I escape the alt-right's clutches? The same way I got in, by mistake. One day on YouTube, a new face, that of Andrew Yang, appeared on the Joe Rogan Experience. The very same podcast I first made contact with alt-right figures like Steven Crowder. Inquisitive as always, I sat down to watch and immediately became entranced by this unorthodox challenger in the US 2020 Democratic primary race. This political outsider who felt like everything establishment Democrats and establishment Dubliners were not. In much the same manner as the alt-right figures who came before him, Yang connected with many young men during the course of his 2 hours on Joe Rogan. He addressed the concerns and fears of men head on. He saw us. From the very beginning, Yang made it clear that issues faced predominantly, but not solely, by men were worth fighting for. Yang acknowledged that white working class men swung to Trump in 2016 in part due to real economic concerns about job losses caused by NAFTA and automation. It didn't matter to Yang that these men were mostly white and thus in many eyes too privileged to deserve concern. He was focused on alleviating suffering, no matter the sufferer. He also didn't avoid gendered statements either. He spat facts and figures that felt lost, if not banished, from the dialogue of traditional Democrats. Yang said, according to the data, that being jobless affected men's mental health much worse than women. This was not the type of statement that I was used to hearing from those left of center. Thanks to Ben Shapiro, I'd begun to believe that facts and feelings were diametrically opposed. So to hear a Democrat disrupting status quo thinking with science based evidence was revolutionary. Like modern day manosphere hacks such as Andrew Tate and far right politicians like Trump, Yang occupied the ground ceded by those unwilling to address men as people who deserve champions, political or otherwise. He evidenced the same ability to connect with men and their issues and grow a movement, but it's how he chose to deal with male issues that set Yang apart. Trump and Tate both seek to profit out of your issues. Tate and the rest of the alt far right circus mobilize young men against women so that they can be rich. Not you. They don't give a fuck about you. You are an income stream. No more, no less. Trump exploits your fears and vilifies immigrants and trans people as the source of your issues. Fear of the other is just another tool to win your votes, not improve your lives. There is no solution to be found there. Yang, on the other hand, provided a solutions based platform which would alleviate the suffering and improve lives. His main policy, universal basic income, was an attempt to negate the effects of unemployment on men displaced by automation, while simultaneously being a means to address the likely increase in wealth inequality that automation would bring if its fruits were only enjoyed by the already rich tech giants rather than the public more generally. His campaign had a resounding message of optimism, which painted the future as something to be changed for the better. He didn't divide or deride, he attempted to unite. I loved Yang. If I may, he was the yin to my yang, and I couldn't even vote. Andrew Yang provided me with a positive vision of masculinity, a compassionate, eloquent problem solver who not only cared deeply about making the world a better place, he was willing to do something about it. He showed me that men could be the solution to the world's problems, not just their source. He let me feel happy and grounded and chaos free. I was able to start living offline. I grew up. I gained empathy. I managed to break the cycle of constantly consuming the algorithm's poisonous delights. Now, I am more aware of the world's failings than ever before. Men are being failed. Women are being failed. Young people are being failed. Poor people are being exploited. Immigrants vilified. Trans people too. The world won't get better sitting watching Andrew Tate on TikTok, nor by voting for parties who promise to bring back the glories of the past, only to usher in a new era of masculine autocracy and oligarchy. But actual, positive male role models who can do something to reverse this creep are few and far between online. And unfortunately, as a society, we've moved past relying on offline figures as role models. Yang didn't set out to influence. He had to do it if he wanted to attract voters. However, most people who discuss men's issues online do so to profit, rather than from pure altruism. Hence, most voices skew towards hate, because hate sells on the internet. It gets amplified by the algorithms, and we can't take our eyes away. And I don't see this changing anytime soon, not least in the USA, where the tech bro class are bending the knee and swearing fealty to the green dollar crown. Any semblance of rule or regulation that could help restrict or limit content fueled by hate won't come into existence in the next 4 years. The EU may follow a similar path too if Musk can promote the AfD in Germany to chancellorship. Faced by these encroachments and threats, perhaps what we need is a masculine hero, with dark, bushy eyebrows. Why he should be so manly that it's in his very name. If not him, then a mass movement should suffice. In any case, all political parties need to realize that men's issues are voters' issues. Every time they fail to properly appreciate this fact, someone else will. We all will suffer if they can't. And they need to understand the importance of communication in the social media age. It's no good attempting to address the issues faced by young men if we're oblivious. We need to know that you're working for us, that you see us, that the policies you propose will lead to positive changes in our lives. If not, we'll continue to be the angry generation. And anger is currently only heading in one direction.